लास्ट टाइम कितनी देर बाद में कनेक्ट हुई थी?
Madam, already 4 and 6 there. So we have start our program. 29 participation is there.
Let's start, sir.
Because 5 minutes are required for introduction and all that things. Okay.
Right.
So
Shall we
are
start?
starting our session from Dr. Vinayak, who is the host of today our meeting.
Hello. Hello. Good afternoon, respected doctors. Welcome everybody. This is the fourth webinar of our Daisar Medical Association. As you all know, India is a diabetic capital, and one of the microvascular complication of diabetes is retinopathy. Apart from retinopathy, there are some more points we'll be discussing today. For that, we have with us Dr. Dipti Pimpre Pitwa, Madam, leading ophthalmologist from Daisar. To moderate the session, we have with us another leading ophthalmologist, Dr. Ritesh Sanghvi sir. Vote of thanks will be given by Dr. Sanjay Upadhyay. To introduce our today's speaker, I called Dr. Dinesh Tiwari. Over to Dr. Dinesh Tiwari.
Thank you, sir. Hello, friends, and good evening. I'm Dr. Dinesh Tiwari, co-editor of DMA. I welcome you all. On behalf of DMA, I welcome Dr. Dipti ma'am to enlighten us on diabetes and eye. Dr. Dipti ma'am is passionate and dedicated eye surgeon. She has completed her MBBS from GSET Medical College and KM Hospital. She has completed her ophthalmic post-graduation and super specialization fellowship in oculoplasty and ocular oncology from Arvind Eye Hospital. She has been practicing ophthalmology since 2011. She consults at Dipti Eye Care Center, Daisar East, and is also an oculoplasty specialist consultant at Karuna Hospital and Manak Kalyan Kendra. Thank you, ma'am. And ma'am, please enlighten us on our topic. Over to you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, sir. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Good evening, madam.
Good evening, ma'am.
I would like to thank DMA for this opportunity given to me. So, as Dr. Vinayak rightly said, every one of you is aware that diabetes is the leading cause of many pathologies, many etiologies in India per se. It affects the eye also, but you may not be aware of all the eye diseases which are caused because of diabetes per se. So today I will be discussing more about all the causes of all eye problems which are attributed to diabetes. So before that, I would like to give you an overview of the eye anatomy, just to give some idea, general idea. This is a cross section of the eye, and the front foremost layer is the transparent layer called cornea, and then there is a pigmented layer, the one which is responsible for the color of our eyes, that's called iris. In the center of iris there is an aperture called pupil. Through this the sun rays or the light enters the eye. Now behind iris is the lens, crystalline lens, which is held in position within the eye by zonules and ciliary body. There is an angle which is formed between this cornea and iris, and this is where the trabecular meshwork, the one responsible for maintaining the intraocular pressure, eye pressure, is situated in this angle. Now the posterior photosensitive layer is called retina. This retina is highly vascular, and you all must be aware that this is where the diabetic retinopathy starts. Macula is the part of retina. The rays coincide and form an image. Now, optic nerve is the afferent nerve of the eye. It takes all the signal from the eye to the brain. A part of optic nerve which we can see through the eye ophthalmoscopically is optic nerve head. Okay, and the white coat is the sclera, white portion. Anteriorly, it is covered by a transparent sheet-like conjunctiva. Now, I will be going tissue by tissue to tell you about how diabetes affects each and every part of the eye. Now, let's start with the adnexa. Adnexa means the part which is next to eye. That is lids, eyelashes. Okay. Now, diabetics have increased incidences of stye. You also must have seen in your practice that diabetic patients develop hordeolum stye very frequently. They develop bacterial conjunctivitis also very frequently. This is because their eyes are colonized by bacteria like Staph aureus and Staph epidermidis, which are responsible for these infections. And that is why they are at the risk of developing lid margin irregularities and also at the risk of developing post-op endophthalmitis in after cataract surgeries. About the cornea. Now, cornea is the transparent portion, transparent layer. It's like a window of the eye, and it is responsible for the refraction and protection of the eye. Cornea has to be maintained transparent, and this is achieved by its uniform structure, lamellae arrangement, avascularity, and detergence. There is also corneal fluid balance maintained by the active bicarbonate pump by endothelial layer and epithelium. Okay, these are the layers, multiple layers within the cornea. So this epithelium and endothelium are responsible mainly for maintaining the transparency of cornea. Now, how does diabetes affect cornea? Cornea, the patient's cornea shows decreased nerve fiber density in diabetic patients, and that's why they have decreased corneal sensitivity. So they are more prone for developing neurotrophic ulcers, and some of them are intolerant to contact lens use. There is also increased incidence of bacterial keratitis in diabetic patients, especially the uncontrolled diabetic patients. The corneal ulcers by Moritz-Zeller is more common in diabetic, and the treatment becomes difficult because of deeper penetration and they require prolonged treatment. Diabetics are also prone for recurrent corneal erosions, that is recurrent cornea scratches over the cornea and delayed corneal wound healing. This is because the epithelium, which is held in position by desmosomes, these desmosomes and hemidesmosomes become reduced in number and become weak. So there is easier sloughing of the epithelial layer. So a question might come in your mind that if these patients have glasses and they are intolerant to contact lens use, then should they be advised to undergo refractive surgeries like LASIK or PRK? More than PRK, LASIK is more helpful and beneficial in diabetic patients because in PRK, we remove the entire corneal epithelium. And so as we know that there is delayed healing and risk of infection in diabetic patients, so a LASIK is a preferred method because in LASIK we make a flap. Then the corneal edema, which develops after almost all intraocular surgeries, there is some amount of corneal edema that develops. In diabetic patients, the resolution of this edema is slower than the normal patient. And this has various theories put forward, like because of enzymatic dysfunction of the bicarbonate pump, as well as protein glycosylation of cornea, and buildup of sorbitol within the corneal stroma. Although diabetic appears to have normal number of and density of endothelial cells, they have irregular morphology. Like this is the normal cornea. Look at the arrangement of endothelial cells. They are normal in cell morphology, density, and very well placed hexagonal cells. While in diabetics, the morphology is changed. Are you all also able to see these lines on the screen? Because these are not part of my presentation.
Yes, Dipti, those lines are seen, but I guess you can carry on.
Yeah, because
would not bother the presentation. Carry on.
Okay. About the open angle glaucoma, there is no consensus about effect of diabetes on the open angle glaucoma, but a type of glaucoma is caused in diabetic patient in very end stage of the diabetic retinopathy, that is neovascular glaucoma. Neovascular glaucoma is when there is formation of new vessels on the iris. If you could see the pointer, this is a slit lamp photo showing a new dilated vessel. These are not the type of vessels we see normally. These are the new developed vessels on the iris, as well as this type of vessels they develop in the angle. And this is because of the effect of VEGF factor, vascular endothelial growth factor, which is produced due to ischemia of retina within the eye. So there is development of these new vessels, and these new vessels, then they form a membrane, fibrovascular membrane, which contracts and then closes the angle. And that's why the increase in intraocular pressure and the glaucoma develops in these patients in advanced cases. Angle closure glaucoma is the next stage of the neovascular glaucoma. There is another entity, lens-induced glaucoma. So because of the increased blood glucose, there is also increased glucose within the aqueous humor, the fluid within the eye, and this infuses inside the lens and causes the lens to swell up. And this lens, when is increased in volume, it pushes the iris ahead, causing closure of the angle and increased intraocular pressure. Now about the crystalline lens. What happens when the increased glucose within the aqueous, what effect it has on the lens is, it is reduced to sorbitol by aldose reductase, and this sorbitol within the lens draws more water inside, making the lens swell up. Okay, there is also glycosylation of the lens protein, fibers. Hence, there is reduced transparency, and this causes change in the index of refraction and curvature of the lens, inducing a myopia. There is a myopic shift which develops, which otherwise would not have been there in the patient. So this is how the raised blood glucose level affects the refraction of the patient. Diabetics are 2 to 4 times more likely to develop cataracts than non-diabetics, and also they develop cataract at earlier stage of the life. There is an increase in the risk which is manifested by high HbA1c layer, also the coexisting kidney disease, and depends also on the age of the patient and the duration of the disease. Cortical type of cataract is the most common type of cataract in diabetics as well as non-diabetics. This is a slit lamp photo showing cortical radial spokes. This is how the cortical cataract look. Now in uncontrolled insulin-dependent diabetes mellitus patients, there is a special type of cortical cataract called snowflake cataract, and this is due to the rapid progressive opacification of the lens fibers. This is how the snowflake cataract looks. But this is nowadays not so common because of the better control of IDDM patient. Diabetics are also more likely to get posterior subcapsular cataract. This is a type of cataract which develops in the posterior layers of the lens. Okay, this is a slit lamp cut section of the lens showing the cataract developing only in the posterior layers. Now about the cataract surgery. Now indications are same for diabetic and non-diabetic patients, but in diabetic patients, if there is coexisting retinopathy, diabetic retinopathy, then we advise patient to undergo surgery earlier, because sometimes it hinders and prevents us from the visualization of fundus and treatment of diabetic retinopathy. There is also, there are comorbidities related to diabetes, other like coronary artery disease, renal insufficiency. These patients are at higher risk of perioperative morbidity, but cataract surgery per se is quite safer surgery, as it's a daycare surgery and short duration surgery. There is always an emphasis on earlier cataract patients. Now, let me give you some idea about the complications which are associated with the cataract surgeries. The most significant is development or progression of neovascular glaucoma or neovascularization of the angle and iris, which leads to glaucoma. Why this happens is because when the lens is removed, the VEGF which is there in the posterior chamber, it easily gets entry into anterior chamber, so it promotes a neovascularization of iris and angle. Pupillary block can happen. Posterior synechiae, the iritis, the post inflammation of the cataract surgery could be more, and in diabetic patients, and takes time for recovery. Also, there is prolonged period of corneal edema after surgery due to damaged corneal endothelium, and PCO, that is posterior capsule opacification formation after the cataract surgery, is also more frequent and soon develops in diabetic patients. About the posterior segment complication, the most important is development or progression of diabetic retinopathy and macular edema after the cataract surgery. So there are many factors which control the outcome of a cataract surgery. Like first and most important is preoperative severity of the retinopathy and presence of macular edema. If patient already has a macular edema, it is definitely going to worsen after a cataract surgery because of the stress induced by the surgery. And also in some patients, the severity progresses after the surgery. But if there is a cataract, we always advocate the surgery to be done to enable us to give the treatment for retinopathy also. The other factors are age, gender, insulin treatment, and glycemic control of the patient, and previous any retinal treatment to be done. There is also a risk of tractional retinal detachment and vitreous hemorrhage after surgery. We explain all this to the patient when they come to us for the surgery. Given the inverse association between the level of retinopathy and visual outcome, it is better to perform cataract extraction in diabetic patient during the earlier stages of retinopathy. Also, it is important to emphasize the risk of progression of the retinopathy after the surgery. Ciliary body is the one which helps in accommodation. That means focusing from near distance to near. So we all know that after 40 years of age, we need a near vision glasses. This is because the accommodative power of the ciliary body decreases with the age. But in diabetic patient, it happens even faster. So diabetics can have early presbyopia. Now, I would talk about the diabetic retinopathy. During first decade of the disease, nearly all patients with type 1 disease, type 1 diabetes will develop some or the other form of retinopathy, and 60% of the type 2 patients develop diabetic retinopathy. We in India broadly follow ETDRS classification. That is no diabetic retinopathy, non-proliferative retinopathy with or without macular edema, and proliferative type of retinopathy with or without macular edema. Pathogenesis, there are multiple theories put forward. Basically, diabetes causes microangiopathies, that is microvascular abnormalities, and that's why there is damage to retinal vasculature. There is capillary occlusion and capillary leakage. Now, occlusion causes retinal hypoxia, which is responsible for development of this growth factors within the retina, within the eye, and that promotes new vessels formation and neovascularization, also AV shunts and intraretinal microaneurysms. Now, capillary leakage is responsible for development of retinal edema and hemorrhages. This gives rise to diffuse edema as well as localized edema and hard exudate formation. This is a fundus photograph showing you all the non-proliferative type of diabetic retinopathy. So it will have this hemorrhages within the retina. These are the cotton wool spots due to ischemia. These are the exudation. These are hard crystalline exudates which are seen. The veins are tortuous and these red dots are the microaneurysms. Diabetic maculopathy is, means macula of the retina is involved, which shows hard exudates and edema. This is a OCT, optical coherence tomography picture, to show you what we see when there is macular edema. This is a normal macula, which will show this depression. And this is the macular edema, cystoid macular edema, when there are cystic fluid filled spaces, bubbles like spaces created within retinal layers. This is the next stage of proliferative retinopathy, when the diabetes is uncontrolled and patient shows progression. What happens is there is development of this new fragile vessels in the retina as well as over the disc. And these vessels are very fragile, they bleed very often, and that is when they give rise to vitreous hemorrhage, pre-retinal hemorrhage within the eye. In advanced stages, what happens is such fibrovascular bands develop and they cause traction on the retinal layers, causing retinal tears and detachment. And then there is rubeosis iridis, that is neovascularization of iris and angle. The end stage of the diabetic eye disease is such shrunken thesical eye with no visual potential left. Treatment of diabetic retinopathy is basically laser photocoagulation of the retina and intravitreal injections of the anti-VEGF factors. Retinal veins are also affected by diabetes. There is retinal vein occlusion, that is central retinal vein occlusion seen, more common with type 2 patients and also when they have associated hypertension or coronary artery diseases. This needs to be distinguished from the diabetic retinopathy. This we do based on the history and vision, And because this causes very severe retinal ischemia and neovascularization, so this requires a very urgent treatment. Now about the optic nerve. Optic nerve shows diabetic papillopathy, which is a milder form of non-arteritic ischemic optic neuropathy. It's very acute onset, but has very mild visual loss. It can be 15% cases, it can be bilateral, and it is more common in type 1 diabetic patients. On visual field, we see there is increase in the blind spot and arcuate scotoma. This disc swelling usually resolves in 2 to 10 months with very minimal residual optic atrophy, and it has very good visual prognosis. This is how the disc looks. Edematous, angry looking disc. Non-arteritic AION is the entity which is more common in elderly patients, those with diabetes, hypertension, and it has swollen optic nerve head. There is relative afferent pupillary defect, dyschromatopsia, and inferior altitudinal visual field defect. It usually gives a fixed permanent deficit, and there is no proven therapy. Sometimes we give steroids in these patients, but it usually resolves on its own in 3 to 4 months. There is an entity called superior segmental optic nerve hypoplasia, which is seen in children born to mothers with type 1 diabetes. And this is usually asymptomatic with inferior visual field defect. And there is a history of frequent tripping or falling by children because of the things at their feet. Oculomotor nerves, that is the nerves which are responsible for the eye movements, are also affected very commonly in diabetic patients. That is third nerve, fourth nerve, and sixth nerve. In diabetic patients, it is because of microangiopathies, like how peripheral neuropathies develop, and this is could be a presenting sign of the diabetes sometimes, and it is can be isolated, or all the multiple cranial nerves can be, oculomotor nerves can also be involved. Sixth nerve is more commonly affected and is due to the demyelination of the nerve. The third nerve palsy of diabetic origin is special. I mean, it usually spares the pupil, because the nerves fibers which supply the pupil muscle, the sphincter pupillae, it runs on the exterior surface and has an alternate blood supply. So that is a differentiating point we usually see. And the palsies, they resolve spontaneously in 3 to 4 months. And they could be of recurrent nature also. Now about the infections of the eye. There are many studies which have shown that postoperative endophthalmitis in diabetics is more. The risk is more because there is impaired cellular and humoral immunity, as well as the delayed wound healing in diabetic patients after the eye surgeries. Mucormycosis is the site and life-threatening emergency. Over 50% of mucor cases occur in diabetics, especially those with ketoacidosis. This mucor originates from the sinus, and then it breaks the orbital walls and enters the orbit and affects the eye. Patients usually present with complete internal and external ophthalmoplegia, that is frozen eye, decreased vision. There will be proptosis, ptosis, and sometimes a black Ishar formation due to vascular invasion and tissue necrosis. The mortality is very high. It's over 50%, and these patients are treated as an emergency. This is a picture showing right side mucor. So the take-home message from the presentation is that diabetics, especially type 1 patients, are at increased risk of many types of ocular diseases, not just retinopathy. Tight glucose control can significantly reduce the incidence of ocular disease and the number of complications which are associated with the treatment. Diabetics should consult ophthalmologist early and regularly. I would like to thank all of you for the patient hearing. Thank you.
All right. I'm supposed to moderate the session now. So it's an honor. I thank DMA for the opportunity, and more so because here the speaker comes from the same institute where I studied, Arvind Eye Hospitals. She's actually my junior, and I have known her since her practice since 5 years. And this presentation was excellent, of a vast topic, was crisply and nicely presented. But the purpose of the webinar is that we take home some messages. We take home some message, and what do we and how do we apply it to our regular practice. So we'll open the session to questions. People can ask their questions in the chat window. And okay, so I'll ask the first question. Both the questions are linked. When should a diabetic patient be referred for eye checkup, and how often diabetic should be seen by an ophthalmic surgeon? So Dipti, you will take it.
Yeah, so as soon as the patient comes to you and you know he's diabetic, you should be sending it to ophthalmologist for the baseline evaluation. That is complete thorough eye checkup, whether there is a cataract, whether there is a retinopathy. All the evaluation, baseline evaluation has to be done as soon as the patient is diagnosed with the diabetes. And how soon depends upon whether the patient has diabetic retinopathy or not. If there is no diabetic retinopathy seen at the presentation, then we call the patient every 1 yearly. If the patient has mild degree of diabetic retinopathy, then we call them every 6 monthly. And if it's a moderate degree, then we do their angiography and required investigations to determine whether the patient requires laser or not. In most of the severe cases, when we know that patient might just trip over to a proliferative type of retinopathy, we advise them to undergo panretinal photocoagulation. And in that case, we call the patients frequently in 3 months.
All right. So here basically the take-home messages on diagnosis have a baseline evaluation, and you can remember this dictum is to check yearly and see clearly. So if you remember this, that every yearly a diabetic needs to have an eye checkup, that will serve as a good thumb rule for how frequent it should be. So the next question is, how common is dryness of eye seen in diabetics?
There is no direct association as such with dryness, but there is definitely more allergies and rubbing, and all this can precipitate dryness in the eye.
There is a question from Dr. Vinayak Desai. He wants to know the brief knowledge about the lens in cataract. I think what probably he means is the choice of IOL to be used in cataract patients.
Okay. So
yeah.
So generally, if there is no macular edema and OCT picture is clear, the macula is healthy, then we, depending upon the affordability, we do advise patients if they want multifocal. But we prefer them to have monofocal lenses, because in future they might need laser, and laser becomes difficult for the retinal surgeon to perform if patient is having multifocal IOL. And also if unfortunately patient requires some retinal surgery, silicone oil or other placement, then that is why we anyway silicone lenses are nowadays not used only. So the available hydrophobic monofocal lenses would be a preferred choice for diabetic patients.
Yes, I would agree. Hydrophobic monofocal IOL is the IOL to be used in diabetics. Okay.
COVID infection through eye.
Yes, there were some reports. However, it's not been documented, but COVID infection can happen through the eye. Yes,
basically,
that is why
it can present as a conjunctivitis, and then from your eye you can introduce in your ENT part, but no proven as such, not many reported cases.
Okay, the next question from Dr. Jayantilal Shah is, what is the indication of injection Avastin and how many injections?
Indication is when we see there is hypoxia of the retina. This is determined by angiography, FFA, fundus fluorescent angiography. If we see that there is a potential hypoxia and there is potential for neovascularization of the retina to develop, or a patient is already having a proliferative diabetic retinopathy, then we advise them to have Avastin. That is, it's an anti-VEGF agent, bevacizumab. And how many injections? Usually 3 injections are advised 1 month apart. And then we re-evaluate if it is required, depending upon the response.
Yeah, there was some question on the progressive. I believe the question is regarding multifocal IOLs.
Multifocal.
Yeah, so if there is an established diabetic retinopathy there in a person, I think definitely it's a definite contraindication to use a progressive or what you would call as a multifocal IOL. In a very well controlled diabetic with a normal macula, you may not consider, but it is best avoided. A multifocal IOL in a diabetic is best avoided because we don't know what will happen in the future. In case he, like she mentioned, if the patient does develop a macular edema, which is going to cause a decrease in vision, and the decrease in vision will be far more in a multifocal patient, because a multifocal patient already has about contrast sensitivity loss due to the multifocality, which will increase with macular edema. So in a diabetic, best case scenario would be to avoid a multifocal eye. Okay, Dr. Jayantilal Shah wants to know how to differentiate between papillitis and papilledema.
Yeah, so papilledema is basically bilateral. It will always present bilateral, and there won't be very significant visual loss and not much of the RAPD basically. And it will be associated with the history of severe headache, could be neck rigidity, vomiting history. This systemic history will be there. And then if you're seeing a bilateral disc edema, we are anyways going to ask for an MRI orbit or a brain, with or without brain, to see whether there is any increased intracranial pressure. So do you want to add anything with this, sir?
No, I think that solves the issue. Papillitis is more sudden onset. Papilledema also can be sudden onset, but obviously it's because of something happening intracranially. And it's bilateral disc edema. Papillitis is generally unilateral. And on clinical examination, as she said, pupil the eye where there is papillitis. I'll ask a more common question. Papillitis, papilledema is not that common. Common is if a diabetic comes for refraction to you, Dipti, and if he has high sugars,
yeah,
what would you do?
We don't do refraction in those diabetic patients with high blood sugar, because as I said that they have a myopic shift which has developed. So prescribing glasses at that stage when their sugars are high is not at all going to serve the purpose, because their refraction is going to change once their sugar levels come down. So we ask them to control the blood sugars and then come for the proper refraction.
Okay. What is IIH hypertension? Dipti?
IIH is benign intracranial hypertension or idiopathic intracranial hypertension. That is when the CSF is more, and that extra CSF is exerting pressure on the brain, because brain is situated in a closed skull cavity. So there is increased intracranial pressure, which in turn optic nerve being part of, they are like an extension of the brain. So the layers around the optic nerve also swell up, giving that papilledema, edema of the disc entire brain is swollen up kind of.
Okay, so I'd like to add BIH or IIH is basically a diagnosis of exclusion. So once you have a patient with papilledema and headache, maybe vomiting, and you do a neuroimaging, and if the imaging comes normal, that is then that you would label a patient having BIH. It's typically seen in a fat female who's 40. So that's the profile of the patient. Generally, there is obesity. She's around 30s, 40s, and it's more common in females. So it's a diagnosis of exclusion. There is no diagnostic criteria. Anything else which can confirm it's a BIH is when you do a lumbar puncture and you see the opening pressures are high. Okay, next important thing is we should talk a little bit more about cataract and diabetes, because these are the more common things. One is refraction, second is cataract and diabetes. So we've discussed cataracts will be seen much earlier in diabetics. They'll progress more rapidly. And the type of IOL should be monofocal, preferably a hydrophobic acrylic. These are the takeaway points, because these are the questions which general practitioners will be asked. Thirdly, Dipti, would you take any extra precautions pre or post cataract surgery other than your non-diabetic patients?
Yes. First of all, in diabetic patients, we would like to have their blood sugar levels well under control, not just a temporary thing. Like, and it should not be कि patient ने गोली खा के surgery के लिए कम करके लिया and then post-op उसका shoot up हो गया, because post-op infections and delayed healing is also seen in diabetic patients. So we want a good blood sugar control, and we start them with preoperative antibiotics, oral as well as topical eye drops, to have preoperatively as well, so that to remove any bacterial load from their conjunctiva or lids. And post-operatively, we see them more frequently. We maintain them longer on the antibiotic and steroid combination eye drops because of more inflammation which they are prone to after the surgery. So do you want to add anything?
No, I guess that's it. You basically look for cystoid macular edema, and we may not give NSAID eye drops in a non-diabetic cataract surgery patient, but in a cataract surgery patient, you would want to add a ketorolac or a nepafenac for that reason. For the same reason that cystoid macular edema is more common with diabetic patients. Okay, we'll talk about patient expectations in treatment of diabetic retinopathy. Unlike cataract, where if wherever we are doing the cataract surgery, and if the sugar is well under control, it will give you a fairly good outcome post surgery. But here, patient expectations after treatment of diabetic retinopathy is best explained before you start the treatment. The vision loss in diabetic retinopathy is more or less permanent. So if a patient comes to you with say about 30% vision loss due to macular edema or due to a vitreous hemorrhage, our aim of treatment is to stabilize his vision and prevent further loss. Most of the time, patients are extremely disappointed when we give them either intravitreal Avastins or laser to stabilize their eye, but there is no improvement in vision. It is very important to tell the patient right at the outset that we are trying to salvage a bad situation. It's almost like if you're sitting in a room and one corner of the room is burned, there is a fire there. So we are just going to douse the fire. We cannot do anything to the damaged room. We are trying that the remaining part of the room remains. most of the patients take treatment with you for one month, 2 months, and at the end of because there is no visual improvement, they tend to fall away. And we've seen this very commonly in our practice, where the treatment of diabetic retinopathy, because it's not explained, then they'll go doctor shopping, and they'll be eventually they will give up the treatment. And another thing to emphasize is glycemic control everywhere, whether you're taking doing the cataract surgery or for diabetes, diabetic retinopathy. The most essential treatment is to control the comorbidities along with the diabetes. So there's another question. Laser keratoplasty more prone for glaucoma after 30-40 years. I saw Divya here, so she would be able to tell us about keratoplasty and glaucoma. I don't know if she's there anymore. I think she's left.
Is she there?
No, I don't think so. So this is not directly related to diabetes and the eye. Deepti, you want to take it?
Yeah, so laser keratoplasty as such, they are not more prone for glaucoma after 30-40. I mean, the LASIK per se does not cause glaucoma development or progression per se.
The assessment of glaucoma is difficult in a patient who has undergone laser keratoplasty.
Yeah.
But the LASIK as per se does not cause glaucoma. Anything you want to add on glaucoma and diabetes?
Yeah, so as I said, open angle glaucoma has not shown any direct association with diabetes per se, but the close angle glaucoma and neovascular glaucoma could be is associated with diabetic retinopathy and diabetic eye disease. And also the steroid treatment, which may be required to be given more in this patient post-surgery or post any treatment, the topical steroids, it can lead to glaucoma development later due to prolonged steroid use.
Dr. Vinayak Desai wants to know why some ophthalmologists say patient requires 6 months for surgery, others say 1 year.
So I don't get the question that.
I mean, if a patient is come with an immature cataract, some ophthalmologists say you will require surgery after 6 months. Someone say 1 year.
It totally depends on what stage the cataract is when patient is presenting to us. If a patient has an advanced cataract, then patient has to undergo it within 15-20 days also. It totally depends on what stage the patient has presented to the surgeon.
No, ma'am. We have seen that so patient comes to goes to one ophthalmologist and he says you have to do the operation as soon as possible, and through that patient's relative, then patient goes to some other ophthalmologist and they say you need 6 months to 1 year or 2 years. So the patient then loses faith on that first ophthalmologist. That's why.
So I think this is a little more subjective. I think one doctor may it's more of a subjective thing, and more on the personality of the doctor and on how he a cataract surgery is grading of cataract and the need for surgery is a subjective thing. It can differ from an ophthalmologist to ophthalmologist.
The ophthalmic sonography is also done now, so the gradation must be there.
No.
The gradation of Deepti, go ahead.
Yeah, so the gradation of cataract is done based on the slit lamp.
Hello.
Thing. So what will appear as grade 3 to me will appear as grade 2 to somebody else or grade 4 to somebody else. There are photographs given but we don't really keep that in the OPD per se. It's all based on our experience and how we perceive the color of the lens.
Okay. Okay, ma'am.
Is another common question. Another common question is allergic conjunctivitis seen more in diabetics? I have tend to seen eye allergies more with diabetics.
Yes. So basically, all allergies are more common in diabetics because they have similar pathogenesis. Both are autoimmune type of disorders. Allergy is also immunity related and diabetes as well. So allergies per se are more common in diabetics, but thankfully we just give topical steroids. The systemic steroids will worsen the diabetes also.
There's another question. Dr. Jayantilal Shah wants to know if patients who take insulin from beginning, whether eye complications are like normal person. I don't think it has got to do anything with taking insulin early. I think if you are a well controlled diabetic, you will protect your brain, heart, kidneys, and eyes. If you are a poor, whether you control it by diet, exercise, oral medications, and insulin is between the patient and the treating physician. If you give insulin early, does it prevent you from getting eye complications? No, I don't think so. I think the level is the issue is to control your sugars and probably have a long-term HbA1c below 7, and which will be associated with lesser complications.
Yes. So fluctuating levels of blood sugars are more harmful. So it doesn't matter how the sugar is controlled. If it is controlled, the development of complications will be later.
And although all the physicians who are attending this, on family physicians who are treating diabetes, if your patient develops retinopathy, more specifically has macular edema, then you have to go back to the patient's prescription and see if the patient is on pioglitazone. If the patient is on pioglitazone, you need to withdraw it, because pioglitazone is going to aggravate the macular edema. This is one medication which you need to avoid if the patient has macular edema. Dipti, would you want to answer this? Correlation between renal disease and macula?
Relation.
Yeah. So I'll take that. If your patient has developed any form of nephropathy, whether it is microalbumin is positive, or if the creat is going up, and if he has never had an eye checkup, he needs an eye checkup immediately, because kidney disease and macular edema have a very, very strong correlation. If you see a bad,
if they have a renal disease, they will have some type of retinopathy.
Yeah, and a bad form of edema, because that kind of macular edema will be more ischemic nature. So where even the laser and Avastins are not going to help too much.
Any other questions?
Sir, any other question from your side?
I guess the presentation and all the questions, we've covered everything. I guess common infections, refractions, word on cataract and retinopathy. I think by and more or less it covers almost everything.
So there is no any more questions, sir, from your side?
Nothing from my side.
Okay. Okay, then thank you, Dr. Dipti ma'am and Dr. Ritesh sir.
Thank
Now
you.
here I am request to Dr. Sanjay Upadhyay sir to give a vote of thanks.
Thank you, Jignesh. Good evening, my dear friends. I am Dr. Sanjay Upadhyay, member of DMA. It's a great privilege that I have been given the chance to give vote of thanks on this nice webinar. And I would like to thank Dr. Dipti Pichwa for this knowledgeful talk, and all my dear friends who have spared their precious time for this webinar. Thank you and take care. Thank you all.
Okay, then, dear friends, here Team DMA is doing a really hard work to success this webinar series. Team DMA is providing such a big digital platform to our DMA members as a speaker to update the knowledge of our colleagues. So if anyone is interested to take the lecture, then please contact to Dr. Vinayak Desai or any committee members of Team DMA. At last, I thank to Team DMA and all the participants who took the active participant in this webinar series. Here I'm announced the end of the today webinar session. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ritesh sir. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for such a wonderful session.